My daughter-in-law, Victoria Foster, a 37-year-old lifestyle influencer, always smiled the brightest at family gatherings. But that smile hid something colder. I am Scott Foster, 69 years old, a retired aerospace engineer living in the quiet suburbs of Boise, Idaho. A few weeks ago, my doctor told me I needed major heart surgery. The bill came to $320,000, and I trusted my oldest child completely, so I handed over every cent I had saved and asked him to handle the hospital and schedule the procedure. He looked me in the eye and promised he would take care of everything. At my birthday party, I looked at my son and asked, "Have you paid Dad's hospital bills yet?" His voice became smug. "Dad, I used the money to go have fun. This time I'm going somewhere really fancy." His wife nodded in agreement. I slowly put down my plate and asked a question that left him speechless. If you enjoy real family drama stories like this, hit the like button right now, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. What would you do if someone you trusted spent your life-saving money? Stay with me, this story gets much darker. A couple of weeks before the party, everything still felt under control. I sat across from Dr. Alexandra Caldwell in her office at the Boise Cardiology Center as she reviewed the latest scans on the monitor. She explained in clear medical terms that my aortic valve had deteriorated more rapidly than previous tests had shown. The recommended open heart surgery carried a price tag of $320,000, covering the procedure, hospital stay, and initial rehabilitation. She stressed the importance of scheduling it within the next few weeks to avoid further complications. I listened carefully, asked several questions about recovery timelines and risks, then left the clinic holding the detailed estimate in my hand. The drive home felt longer than usual as the weight of the numbers settled in my mind. That same evening, I called my son. Eric Foster, my 41-year-old marketing executive, arrived at the house within the hour. He walked into the living room carrying his briefcase, still dressed in his work clothes from the office. I sat him down at the dining table and laid out the diagnosis, the exact amount required, and the urgency the doctor had emphasized. Then I handed him a thick folder containing every savings account statement, investment record, and retirement summary I had accumulated over decades of careful planning. You're the oldest, Eric. I trust you more than anyone else in this family to manage this for me. Pay the hospital when the time comes and make sure the procedure is booked properly. I don't want any delays. Eric took the folder and flipped through the first few pages slowly. He looked me in the eye and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I've got this. I'll handle the payment and the scheduling so you can focus on getting better. You've worked hard your whole life. Let me take care of it now." Victoria Foster, my 37-year-old daughter-in-law and lifestyle influencer, stood beside him with her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She gave a warm, reassuring smile and added, "We'll take care of everything. Dad, you've done so much for us over the years. Now it's our turn to step up and support you through this." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the tension in my shoulders eased slightly. For the first time since leaving the doctor's office, the heavy pressure in my chest seemed a little lighter. We sat together in the living room for nearly an hour, discussing practical details while keeping the conversation from becoming too heavy. Eric talked about his current marketing campaigns at the tech firm and how he could adjust his schedule to manage the hospital paperwork. Victoria shared a few ideas from her content calendar, mentioning how she planned to create posts about family support during difficult times. She nodded attentively whenever Eric spoke, her voice soft and encouraging. "Honey, your dad is right to count on you," she said at one point, gently squeezing his hand. I asked Eric to confirm he understood the full amount and the need to keep the funds untouched until the hospital required payment. He assured me multiple times that the money would remain safe in a dedicated account he would set up. Victoria listened quietly, occasionally offering small comments about how proud she was of Eric for taking on this responsibility. The three of us reviewed the folder together, page by page, making notes on important dates and contact information for the hospital billing department. As the evening wound down, Eric stood up and gave me a firm hug at the front door. "I promise I won't let you down." "Dad," he repeated before they left. I watched their car pull away down the quiet suburban street in Boise and told myself I had made the correct choice. My son had a stable career and a reliable partner. He understood what responsibility meant. With him handling the finances, the surgery would proceed without issues, the bills would be covered, and I could focus entirely on my health. For those few hours, The uncertain future appeared manageable once again, and the burden I had carried alone felt shared. A few days later, I was sorting mail in the kitchen when I heard voices drifting from the back patio. Eric and Victoria had stopped by without calling ahead to pick up some old family photos Victoria wanted for a new album she was creating for her social media. I moved quietly toward the open sliding glass door and stopped just inside the frame, remaining out of sight. Eric paced slowly while speaking on his phone, his tone casual and excited. Yeah, the flights are locked in for next month. Paris first, then 10 days at that villa in Tuscany. We can add the private transfer and the wine tasting tour too. It's only money at this point. Victoria leaned against the railing, scrolling through her phone with a satisfied smile. Honey, make sure the suite has the big balcony overlooking the hills. I already promised my followers we're doing Europe properly this time, no more budget trips. She tapped her screen, and I caught the notification sound of a new post going live, her wearing oversized designer sunglasses. The caption already teasing cobblestone streets and five-star experiences. I stayed hidden and continued listening as they discussed details without any hesitation. Eric laughed lightly. Then once we hit Rome, we'll rent the convertible for the countryside drive. This is going to be the trip we've talked about for years. Dad's situation's covered anyway, so we don't need to hold back. Victoria nodded enthusiastically, adding suggestions about exclusive restaurants and private tours she had researched. Their conversation flowed easily, full of plans for luxury accommodations and experiences that clearly required substantial spending. The quiet Boise afternoon made every word carry clearly to where I stood. Later that same afternoon, Kelsey Foster, my 38-year-old daughter who teaches high school English, dropped in unexpectedly with a plate of fresh-baked cookies. She set them on the counter and gave me a quick hug. Hey, Dad, I was finishing up at school and thought I'd swing by to see how you're doing. We sat at the kitchen table while she talked about her students' latest writing assignments and an upcoming parent-teacher conference. Then, in the middle of the conversation, she asked casually, by the way, has Eric already taken care of that large hospital payment you mentioned last time? I know it was a significant amount, and I wanted to make sure everything was moving forward. I kept my expression neutral and replied that the matter was being handled. Kelsey smiled and shifted back to lighter topics about her classroom, but the question lingered in the air between us. She stayed for nearly an hour, helping me organize a few papers before leaving with a promise to check in again soon. That evening, I sat alone in the living room and opened my banking app for the first time since giving Eric the folder. The balance had dropped noticeably. No large transfer had been made to the hospital. Meanwhile, Victoria's social media feed continued to fill with new images, airport lounges, designer luggage tags, and teaser shots of European landmarks. Each post showed another piece of the expensive trip they had been planning on the patio. The doubts I had tried to push aside grew sharper with every new detail I noticed. I told myself it could still be a simple misunderstanding or poor timing with the payments, yet the combination of the overheard conversation, Kelsey's innocent question, and the visible spending patterns pointed in one clear direction. I had no concrete proof yet, only a growing unease that refused to fade. For the time being, I decided to observe quietly and gather more information before taking any action. The suburbs of Boise, which had always felt peaceful, now carried an undercurrent of uncertainty that kept me awake longer than usual that night. 1 week later, the weight of suspicion had grown too heavy to ignore any longer. I picked up the phone and called Donald Bennett, my old friend who had practiced law for 30 years before retiring to a quieter life. He arrived at my house that same afternoon carrying a small briefcase and a notepad. We sat at the dining table with the door closed to ensure privacy. Then I told him everything I had observed over the past days and handed over the login details for the accounts I had originally given to Eric. Donald opened his laptop and began reviewing the transaction history methodically, his expression growing more serious with each page he examined. He scrolled through weeks of activity, pausing frequently to make notes. Scott, the withdrawal started almost immediately after you transferred the funds, he said in a measured tone. There are multiple large payments to international travel agencies, direct bookings with major airlines for first-class seats, and reservations at several high-end hotels across Europe, Paris, Tuscany, Rome. The charges include luxury villas, private drivers, and additional experiences. Nearly the entire $320,000 has either been spent or committed to upcoming payments. No hospital transfer has been made, and no surgery has been scheduled. He turned the screen toward me so I could see the detailed statements, though the numbers and dates left no room for doubt. Donald leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. This appears deliberate rather than accidental. They treated the account like a personal vacation fund. If we move quickly, we can still trace every transaction and build a strong record. I nodded silently, absorbing the information while keeping my emotions in check. Donald continued explaining the next steps, including how to document everything properly for potential legal protection. Later that evening, Kelsey stopped by again. She brought a folder she had quietly compiled from Victoria's public social media activity and some printed receipts she had found while helping with routine household tasks. So, Dad, I didn't want to get involved unnecessarily, babe, but I noticed several charges that didn't align with what you told me about the hospital. She said, the folder contains screenshots of Victoria's posts showing designer luggage at airports, five-star restaurant bills, and hotel confirmation emails that matched the exact dates and amounts Donald had just identified on the bank statements. Kelsey had carefully cross-checked the figures, and the total aligned almost exactly with the missing funds. We spent a long time at the table going through the documents together. Donald outlined the legal options available without pressuring me toward any specific path. He emphasized the importance of gathering solid, organized proof now to protect my position if the situation escalated. Kelsey offered to continue helping with any additional records she could access discreetly through her own channels. I listened carefully to both of them, asking detailed questions about timelines, documentation requirements, and possible outcomes. By the time Donald and Kelsey left, the full picture had become painfully clear. The money I had trusted my son to manage for my heart surgery had instead been used for their luxury European trip. A cold sense of resolve formed inside me as I sat alone afterward. I would not rush into any confrontation or give them advance warning. Instead, I began mentally outlining my own steps, securing what remained of my finances, arranging medical care independently, and preparing carefully for whatever would come next. The house in Boise felt heavier that night, but my mind was already shifting toward the plan I needed to execute on my own terms. After reviewing all the documents with Donald and Kelsey, I knew I could no longer rely on anyone else for my surgery. Bescheid. The next morning, I contacted my bank and began the process of liquidating several long-held stock positions that I had deliberately kept separate from the main account I gave Eric. The sales were executed carefully over the following 2 days, generating enough capital to cover the full $320,000 plus an additional buffer for any unexpected recovery expenses. I transferred the exact amount directly to the hospital's billing department and received immediate confirmation that the wire had cleared successfully. Doctor Alexandra Caldwell's office then scheduled the procedure for the earliest available slot 2 weeks out. I signed all the consent forms electronically and attended the pre-op consultation alone, answering every question the nurse and anesthesiologist asked without once mentioning my family situation or the financial complications. Each step felt deliberate and irreversible. Well, there I was. I updated my living will with new instructions, arranged for post-surgery home care through a private nursing service, and prepared a small overnight bag with essential items in case the hospital stay extended. I also reviewed my insurance coverage one final time and made backup arrangements for transportation to and from the facility. The house in Boise remained outwardly normal during these days. When Eric or Victoria called, I kept my responses short and neutral, never hinting at the discoveries I had made or the independent actions I was taking. They continued mentioning details about their upcoming trip in passing, but I ended those conversations quickly without engaging. Despite everything, I still agreed to host the birthday gathering as originally planned. The invitations had already been sent out weeks earlier, and suddenly canceling would only create questions I was not prepared to answer at that moment. Instead, I focused on maintaining normal appearances on the surface. I ordered catering from a local service, bought a few basic decorations, and handled the practical preparations as if this were any ordinary family occasion. Inside, however, my thoughts remained fixed on the surgery date and the recovery period that would follow. I visualized completing the procedure on my own terms, walking out of the hospital without owing explanations to people who had already demonstrated where their priorities truly lay. The money I had worked for decades to save was now fully secured for its intended medical purpose. There would be no more delays and no more misplaced trust. The quiet routine of my days in the suburbs provided the space I needed to think clearly and prepare mentally for the operation ahead. By the time the final pre-op tests were completed and cleared, I felt a quiet but steady sense of control returning. The procedure would take place regardless of anyone else's plans or spending decisions. I had taken every necessary step independently, And that decision brought a calm I had not experienced since receiving the initial diagnosis. The birthday party would serve its purpose as a public gathering, but my real preparations were already complete, protected, and entirely under my own management. That evening, the house filled with the usual sounds of a family gathering. Guests arrived one by one, carrying small gifts and warm greetings. The dining table was set with the catering I had ordered, plates arranged neatly under the soft overhead lights. Eric and Victoria came through the front door smiling. Eric holding a bottle of wine and Victoria carrying a brightly wrapped package. Kelsey arrived shortly afterward, her expression calm as she joined the group at the table. We all took our seats, passing dishes and exchanging light conversation about recent work projects and weekend plans. Halfway through the main course, I set my fork down and looked directly at my son. Have you paid Dad's hospital bills yet? My voice carried clearly across the table. Eric's expression changed instantly. His voice became smug as he replied, Dad, I used the money to go have fun. This time I'm going somewhere really fancy. Victoria nodded in agreement beside him, her smile still fixed in place. I slowly put down my plate and asked the question that left him speechless. Then why are there charges for first-class flights to Paris, a villa in Tuscany, and luxury hotels in Rome totaling nearly the entire amount I gave you? The room fell completely silent. Eric stared at me, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Victoria's hand tightened around her glass. I continued speaking in the same even tone without raising my voice. I have the complete bank statements right here. Every withdrawal is documented, the airline tickets, the hotel reservations, the private transfers, and the additional experiences. None of it went toward the hospital. None of it was used for my surgery. I reached for the folder beside my chair and placed the printed records on the table where everyone could clearly see them. The dates matched perfectly with the social media posts. The amounts lined up exactly with what had disappeared from the account. Eric tried to respond, but stopped when he saw the pages spread out in front of him. Dad, it's not what it looks like, he began, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Victoria glanced quickly at him, her earlier nod now replaced with a tense expression. Kelsey watched quietly from her seat, her face showing no surprise at the unfolding scene. I kept my tone steady as I went through the transactions one by one, the flight confirmations, the 5-star accommodations, the extra charges incurred in Europe. Each detail landed heavily in the quiet room. The birthday celebration had completely transformed into something else. No one reached for more food. The wine glasses remained untouched. Eric's face flushed as the full realization hit him. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding direct eye contact with anyone at the table. I did not shout or make dramatic accusations. I simply laid out the verified facts at my own birthday dinner, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. The atmosphere grew thick with discomfort as the weight of what had happened settled over every person present. A few days after the birthday gathering, the reality of what had happened began to unfold rapidly. I contacted Donald Bennett again and asked him to help prepare the necessary legal paperwork. He recommended filing a civil suit focused on elder financial exploitation under Idaho statutes. The complaint carefully detailed the unauthorized use of funds that had been entrusted specifically for my medical care. We submitted comprehensive bank records, transaction logs, hotel and airline confirmations, and all supporting documentation to the court. The process moved more quickly than I anticipated once the evidence was properly organized and presented. Eric received formal notification from the court within the week. His company called him in for an emergency meeting. The same afternoon, the news began circulating internally. By the end of that day, he was terminated from his marketing executive position. The firm cited concerns over reputational risk and loss of trust after details of the family financial dispute became known among colleagues and leadership. Victoria's lifestyle influencer channel experienced an immediate and sharp decline in engagement. Several brand partnerships she had been negotiating suddenly went silent as sponsors chose to distance themselves from the emerging public scandal. I received regular updates through my attorney without any direct communication with Eric or Victoria. The court scheduled an initial hearing for the following month. Donald explained that given the substantial amount involved, the case could potentially qualify as a felony under state law, which might lead to restitution orders and additional penalties beyond the civil suit. Credit reporting agencies would soon reflect the legal action, significantly affecting future loan applications, housing options, and overall financial standing for both Eric and Victoria. Meanwhile, my own surgery had taken place exactly as scheduled. I recovered in the hospital for several days under the care of the private nursing service I had arranged beforehand. The procedure went smoothly, and the medical team confirmed that the valve repair was successful with no immediate complications. I attended all follow-up appointments and physical therapy sessions alone, focusing entirely on my recovery without involving any family members in the process. Eric attempted to call multiple times, leaving messages that grew increasingly apologetic and urgent. Victoria also reached out once, her tone noticeably different from the confident voice I remembered at the dinner table. I did not return any of the calls or respond to the texts. The decision to cut off contact felt final and necessary once the legal papers were formally served. No further explanations were required. The consequences were already becoming visible through lost employment, damaged professional relationships, and mounting legal and financial pressure. The house in Boise grew noticeably quieter as I prepared for the next phase of my life. Donald continued to assist me with reviewing options for asset protection and future living arrangements. Every action I took now centered on securing my independence and ensuring that the funds originally intended for my health were addressed through proper legal channels. The events of recent weeks had made one thing unmistakably clear: certain boundaries could no longer be ignored or crossed without accountability. 1 month after the legal proceedings were underway, I made my final decisions. I stopped answering every incoming call and systematically deleted all message threads without reading them. Eric and Victoria both tried reaching out through different phone numbers and even through mutual acquaintances, but I blocked each attempt immediately. The court had accepted the case and issued temporary orders that froze certain accounts connected to the disputed funds. Restitution would now be pursued strictly through formal legal channels rather than any personal discussion. I had no interest in conversations that could only repeat old justifications or empty promises. I sold the house in Boise and arranged for a clean, quiet relocation to Pearland, Texas. The new residence was smaller and simpler, located far enough away that daily reminders of the past would not follow me. I packed only the essential items needed for daily living and left behind objects that carried too many shared family memories. The move was completed efficiently with the help of a professional moving service. Once settled in the new place, I changed my phone number and updated my contact information exclusively with essential medical providers and my attorney. Eric lost far more than his job. The combination of the civil lawsuit and the workplace termination severely damaged his professional reputation, causing new employment opportunities to dry up almost immediately. Creditors began contacting them as joint expenses surfaced, and their credit scores dropped sharply due to the legal action and unpaid obligations. Their previously planned luxury lifestyle became unsustainable under the mounting financial pressure and court restrictions. Victoria's influencer income shrank to almost nothing as brand sponsorships and follower engagement disappeared following the public-family conflict. Kelsey maintained occasional brief contact with me through neutral topics, but I kept those conversations short and strictly surface level. She understood the firm boundary I had established and did not attempt to push for any form of reconciliation. I made it clear that my door remained closed to anyone who had participated in or benefited from the misuse of funds intended for my medical needs. So in the quiet evenings in my new home in Pearland, I often reflected on how quickly long-standing trust can dissolve when self-interest and personal luxury take priority over family responsibility. Blood relation alone does not grant automatic forgiveness for deliberate betrayal, especially when that betrayal directly threatens a parent's health and financial security. The legal system in this country treats elder financial exploitation with appropriate seriousness precisely because older adults can become highly vulnerable after decades of hard work and careful saving. Cutting all contact was not driven by anger, but served as a necessary act of self-protection for the remaining years of my life. I now walk each morning in the peaceful neighborhood, attend all medical follow-up appointments on my own schedule, and manage my remaining savings with complete independence and control. No more handing over important responsibilities to others. This entire experience delivered a hard but practical lesson. Real boundaries must be enforced when trust is broken at this level. Family ties should never excuse actions that place personal enjoyment above a parent's basic medical needs. I live peacefully now, knowing I took the steps required to secure my future without further compromise or regret.